Welcome. In this video, we will discuss about the India and Vietnam bilateral relationship. So this topic is important from your international relation topic, which is part of your GS paper 2. So now there are some conventional countries with which you anyway might have been reading about the international bilateral relationship between India and those countries, and those are like very important. For an example, US, Russia, China in the present context, even the eight neighbors. So, from that perspective, Vietnam is actually not something which we read in the the conventional books or the general conventional classes. But this has been in news, so it becomes important that you understand what is the relationship between India and Vietnam. Just to remind you, I have already made a video regarding the RCEP and ASEAN. Go through that, the reason why India didn't join the RCEP. So all these things are important to know the going forward what kind of relationship India and Vietnam is going to have. So let's start. So Indian Defence Minister and his Vietnamese counterpart discussed the collaboration in defence industry capability building, training and cooperation in United Nations peacekeeping operation during the bilateral talks. So basically recently the defense ministers of both sides, India and Vietnam, they came around on a video conferencing where they discussed about how both of these countries could collaborate to develop the capacity as well as for training and cooperation in the UN peacekeeping force. So these are the few areas where the discussion went along. An implementation agreement on hydrography was signed between the India and Vietnam. So hydrography, which is basically the study of how the water is measured. So that kind of study, so that because Vietnam and India both share the Indian Ocean, so it's more along the line to measure the exact amount or the river system also. So all along all this encompassing factor, a hydrography implementation agreement was signed. The two countries discussed ways to further the comprehensive strategic partnership and friendship between the both countries. So just remember, as of today, India and Vietnam has the comprehensive strategic partnership. Underlying the vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat for enhancing self-reliance, including defense industries, the India side urged closer defense industry cooperation between India and Vietnam by concluding an institutionalized framework agreement in the new future. So the idea is for the better cooperation or collaboration in the defense sector, both of the countries should come up with more of an institutionalized framework through which they could carry on the negotiation or the conversation. So these are the latest context or the latest conversation which went around between the defense minister from both sides. Now let's try to understand more about their bilateral relationship. So the Republic of India and Socialist Republic of Vietnam enjoy a strong bilateral relationship. So as of today, India and Vietnam share good relationship with terms of cultural and economic links between India and Vietnam as they date back to the 2nd century. Like even in ancient history, there was a trade between the India and the Vietnam side. In contemporary era, relationship between India and Vietnam have been governed by several areas of shared political interest. So both of these countries, again, from the regional perspective, the Vietnam actually looked towards India to counter the influence of China, which is growing at an alarming state. So that is also one of the thing in which India and Vietnam shared the common interest. India supported Vietnam's independence from France, opposed American involvement in the Vietnam War, and supported unification of Vietnam. So this is the historical involvement of India into the polity or the construction of Vietnam as a country that it did. Like India, Vietnam was in under the colonial rule of France, and India did supported its independence from that. Then after that, we all know, you must have read about in your world history about the Vietnam War and the kind of involvement Americans had at that time. So India did oppose that, and India also supported the unification of Vietnam. So earlier it was actually North Vietnam and South Vietnam, but India supported the unification, and right now we know that it's a single Vietnam. In 1992, India and Vietnam established extensive economic ties, including oil exploration, agriculture, and manufacturing. The relations between the two countries, especially the defense ties, benefit extensively from India's low-cost policy. So now we know that after the Modi government come into power in the 2014, the foreign policy shifted from, instead of just looking towards the East policy, it came to be known as Act East policy, which means that the present government is also very much committed to improve its relationship with the East Asian countries. So this is again something, Vietnam is one of the major component of that factor. Bilateral military cooperation includes sale of military equipment, sharing of intelligence, joint naval exercises, training in insurgency and the jungle warfare. So all these things, like India do share the military cooperation with the Vietnam. India also regularly deploys its warship for goodwill visit to Vietnamese Sea. So this is also one of the important factor, that warships towards the Vietnamese seas as a gesture of goodwill is also deployed from the Indian side. India and North Vietnam established official diplomatic relation in 1972 and have since maintained friendly relationship, especially in the wake of Vietnam hostile relationship with the China, with which India had some diplomatic disputes. So we know that there is a reason where with the Vietnam and China are disputing over with the kind of aggression China is showing in the South China Sea. So there are certain islands which is conflicted between Vietnam and China, along with the Taiwan also. So in that regard, it could actually means that Vietnam and India are converging as against the China's increasing influence over the region. So these are the few things. Then apart from that, what are the other areas of convergence? So India granted the most favored nation status to Vietnam way back in 1975 itself. Most favored nation means that the kind of trade agreement which India has with any other nation with which it has the free trade agreement, it will also give the same. So it cannot have any kind of tariffs or anything which it did not have with any other nation with which it has the free trade agreement. So that is the basic underlying meaning of most favored nation. So India did granted Vietnam with that MFN nation status way back in 1975. And both nations signed a bilateral trade agreement in 1978 and bilateral investment promotion and protection agreement in 1997. So this is the name of the agreement which is signed from the bilaterally India and Vietnam. Then in 2010, as the ASEAN-India Free Trade Agreement came into effect, bilateral trade exploded to around 3.917 million US dollar by the end of 2012, and with Vietnam exporting 1.7 billion to India in 2012, an increase of 56.5 from 2011. So if you actually, so this is actually the data which is present in the MEA document. You can Google it and search for the more latest data, but the idea goes around the line that once India signed a free trade agreement with the ASEAN countries, the trade between the India and Vietnam also increased. So these are the areas of convergence, or you can say India and Vietnam do share a good economic ties. Now just for your reference, look at the location of Vietnam over here. So you just see that Vietnam along with Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, Laos, then Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines, all these areas are very important for India from the perspective of Indo-Pacific region also, because they are the one which link the Indo-Pacific region. So from the perspective of Indo-Pacific region as well as the Act East policy. So both of these things are actually converging for these countries, and Vietnam is one of the important component in it. So I hope you have understood this video. If you have any doubt, feel free to drop a comment. Thank you.